Today, the politics of same-sex marriage just one day after a federal judge struck down a California ban. And the Senate vote on Elena Kagan, poised to become the 112th justice on the Supreme Court and only the fourth woman. Joining me to talk about both of these issues is Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee, who's led the opposition against Kagan, and last night from the Senate floor blasted the federal judge who said California's gay marriage ban was unconstitutional. Take a look.
Obviously, at some point, this will get to the Supreme Court of the United States, as you well know. It go first to the Ninth Circuit, on which you clerked, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court probably. And we'll have the nominee that's before us today, who's already demonstrated at Harvard that her views about don't ask, don't tell, and similar social marriage, sexual relation matters involve such strong feelings on her part that she's not been able to follow the law. And I'm worried about that. I think the American people are worried about that. And I just think they have a right to be.
Senator Sessions, thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about that ruling yesterday. What did you find to be the most troubling thing in that judge's decision?
Well, first, the perspective is that a single sitting federal judge has just invalidated the vote of millions of Californians who desire to define what marriage is in California. They define it as between a man and a woman. And he has overruled that. There's nothing in any of the provisions of our Constitution that would have suggested that any of those drafters of it intended that the Constitution would be interpreted as to mandating the recognition of same-sex marriages. It's just not there. It's a matter that should be left to the people, not be decided by an unelected, lifetime-appointed judge who clearly was, from his opinion, was citing his own views, emotions, and feelings about this issue.
Well, now, you said last night in your floor speech that obviously this is going to be appealed and probably up to the Supreme Court. You're a lawyer, obviously. You're on the Judiciary Committee. What do you think this will mean if it is ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court, if the court adopts this rationale?
Well, it will mean that they have declared that the United States Constitution requires that same-sex marriages be recognized just the same as normal marriages. And this is a huge legislative act, would be by the courts if they were to do that. My understanding is that, if I'm not mistaken, the California court has already upheld, the California State Supreme Court upheld this act. I would hope Supreme Court would uphold the people's decision and not the judge's decision, but it does remain to be seen. And Elena Kagan, who's already demonstrated a very strong, personal, deep bias on these kind of issues, will be one of the judges, if confirmed, that will decide the case.
Well, now, before we go on to Kagan, let me just ask you one more question about this ruling, though. I mean, if the Supreme Court, let's just play this out. If the Supreme Court decides to uphold this ruling and say there is a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, what is the impact of that going to be across the country? What's your sense of how controversial this will be? How will people react?
It will be very controversial. People will react adversely for two reasons. They'll react adversely if they don't like the policy, and they'll react adversely if they believe it's not the judicial role to define marriage when it's not in the Constitution. And remember this, when a judge declares that the Constitution says you must recognize same-sex marriage, this cannot be changed by a state legislature. No state government can change it, not even the federal Congress can. Only by a constitutional amendment. 2/3 of both houses, 3/4 of the states. That's what it takes when they declare something is in the Constitution. And when it's not, it's a tremendous abuse of power by a judge who's unelected and unaccountable to the public.
Now, you predicted, I think last night, you showed your cards that you think that Elena Kagan would probably vote to uphold this judge's ruling and find that there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. What makes you think that?
Well, she has indicated support for the most activist judges in the country. She's clerked for some of them. She advocates that a judge should allow their personal views, biases, background to influence their decision, and that's what President Obama said he was doing when he appointed her. He wanted somebody to do that. And we know, based on her effort at Harvard to block the military, because the military policy passed by Congress didn't satisfy her view of handling homosexuality in the military, that she has a bias and a strong feelings in that way. So I think it would appear to me that she strongly would favor the judge's ruling out there, personally. And secondly, her view of the Constitution and the role of a judge is such that she believes a judge is empowered and should indeed allow their personal values to influence the decision. So the combination is toxic. You get a political activist liberal believing that they have the right to use that judicial decision-making power to set policy. It's not a good thing.
But you know, she's one vote. I think most people think of it, seems to me anyway, that this is going to be 5-4. You know, you've got your 4 liberals on one side, Kagan being the new one, presumably, since it looks like she's going to get confirmed later today, the 4 conservatives, and Justice Kennedy, you know, that human jump ball right there in the middle. So, I mean, this is all going to come down to one vote, isn't it, eventually, Anthony Kennedy?
That's probably what conventional wisdom would say.
Now, are you saying I have conventional wisdom? Come on, that's supposed to be insightful.
Well, you are insightful, and that's conventional wisdom by careful court watchers.
Thank you. That's better.
Good lawyers would say that's probably where it may well break down. But the way I see it, Jan, is that every vote on the Supreme Court is critical. You should not say, well, we're not worried about it because Justice Stevens may have voted that way, the judge she's replacing, and so don't worry about it. No, every vote is important, and every judge confirmed should be committed to following the law objectively, impartially, not to allow their personal views and feelings and concepts and ideology to influence the objective duty they have to follow the law, whether they like it or not.
Well, now this is obviously something that you've been really hammering on for the past couple months during this Kagan confirmation process, but obviously looks like she's going to get confirmed later on this afternoon. What's the latest you're hearing about how many Republicans are going to vote for her?
Well, I think 5 have said they would vote for her, mostly in the Northeast area in her area, but it's but the polling data show her numbers are well below that of Justice Sotomayor even. And
you mean her support by the public?
Support by the public is well below 50%. It's a record low, actually. And I think that there'll be more no votes than normal.
Well,
more no votes than on Sotomayor, which indicates her nomination has not played well. It indicates the American people are concerned about President Obama's philosophy. And I can tell you, he has a philosophy that I think is flawed, but he is appointing judges who agree with his philosophy. And they're going to be the kind of judges that won't hesitate, I'm afraid, to advance the law in ways they think might be better for the country.
Now, you've got one Democrat who's going to vote against her, Ben Nelson. Yeah. What does that say to you? I mean, does that say that he's concerned about what people back in his home state are thinking? He's feeling some heat there on some of her positions on these issues?
Yeah, it's a good. I think Ben Nelson and I have talked over the years about judges. He voted for a number of Reagan Bush judges that other Democrats opposed. He appointed a lot of judges as governor of Nebraska. He has a view that judges should show restraint. I think it was a very significant signal when Ben Nelson analyzed this nominee and found her wanting.
All right, and finally, Senator Sessions, I got to ask you, though, what about this whole notion? I mean, Sam Alito, you and I have discussed this before. Sam Alito was highly qualified. No one questioned his intellect, his experience. Yet all these Democrats voted against him, and you were making the arguments then that, listen, he's qualified, let's just vote for him. Why doesn't that work this go around with Kagan?
Good question and a fair question. Justice Alito was not only qualified, he was a magnificent nominee and did a fabulous job at the hearing, demonstrating the clarity of mind you look for in a great judge, the experience, the ability to talk about cases without hesitation. He was a superb nominee, and he was committed to the philosophy that a judge should show restraint, not allow their personal values to influence their decision making. Nominee Kagan has the least experience of any judge in 50 years. She had 2 years of law practice right after law school and 14 months as Solicitor General. She's not prepared for this office. She does not have, in my view, from the hearing, really the kind of clarity of thought and approach to law you would look for in a judge. I think the president just made a mistake. And she also, let me say this, I strongly believe that after promising explicitly to defend the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law as Solicitor General when it was challenged, she did not do so. She violated her commitment to the Congress, and she violated her duty as Solicitor General, and I think that's disqualifying in itself.
All right, well, it's pretty strong words, Senator Sessions. Is there anyone you would have rather seen the president nominate? I mean, elections have consequences. He is the president.
That's true. Elections do have consequences, but the president could have submitted somebody that would have great Republican support. In fact, I'll vote for 90% of his nominees to the other judges, spots around the country. But he could absolutely have chosen a real strong judge, maybe more expansive in the law than I would be, but somebody that would have strong bipartisan support. Instead, he chose a nominee that was guaranteed to be controversial.
All right. Well, Senator, as always, we really appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you got a busy day and you got to vote later on, and we know you're going to vote no. What do you think the final vote will be?
I think it'll be a pretty high no vote. Our members tend to try to give deference to the president. I believe we should give some deference to the president's nomination. But in this nominee, I think you'll see considerably more no votes than Sotomayor. And as you indicated, at least one Democrat will be voting no.
All right. So under 65 yeses?
Well, I won't speculate
right around there?
about that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait and see.
There's been no whipping on the Republican side, no pushing on senators to vote. Every senator is just voting as they feel is best.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look forward to talking to you again soon.